Well, hello my friends, JW here, and welcome to another different video on the channel. You've probably seen other YouTubers do similar sorts of videos. I myself did one maybe a week or two ago with what I think the remaining DLCs are going to be for Planet Zoo in 2023. This one looks at 2024 and beyond, if we are indeed getting content in 2024 and beyond. Primarily, it isn't a wishlist video, despite what it says on the screen. That will be coming later down the line. Instead, we take some educated guesses and logical predictions at what could be coming in 2024 and beyond, if indeed we are getting anything in 2024 and beyond. That being said, let's get stuck in. Let's see what awaits us. So for 2024, I think we will get 4 DLCs as usual, those being April, June, October and December. I think we'll get 4 free updates, those being 1.17, 1.18, 1.19 and 1.21. The 5th anniversary update would be 1.20, and I think that the final paid DLC and update will be in December 2024. I hope I'm wrong. I do hope I'm wrong. And I hope that the last DLC is in 2025 or 2026 or even beyond that, and there are some compelling factors that could prove that this game has a longer lifespan than most people would initially think, and we'll get onto that after what I've spoken about. Hope we'll get. But what would I like to see moving forward? I hope we'll get paid DLC and free updates throughout 2024 and 2025, as well as the 6th anniversary of the game in November 2025. It'd be nicer still if we got DLC throughout 2026 too, and perhaps even all the way up to 2029, which would mark 10 years of Planet Zoo. Though, in my eyes, as much as I would hope for 10 years of DLC and updates, I think it is unlikely. However, content-wise, the game could go on for another 5 or 6 years, until things get boring, where the DLCs literally just end up being clones of animals and reskins, or things become financially unviable. For example, Frontier are spending more money on the creation of a DLC than they get back in sales. And although I wouldn't be against clone animals and reskins, if we were to get a pack of 8 tamarins and marmosets or 8 macaws, for example, that said, Planet Zoo currently stands unchallenged in the field of zoo simulation games. There are, of course, other zoo simulators, like Let's Build a Zoo and the upcoming Zookeeper Simulator, but these two games don't even remotely scratch what Frontier has going with Planet Zoo, both in terms of quality, quantity, and profit. And of course it makes sense for Frontier to keep milking this position for cash. Adding flying birds could extend the life of the game by a good few years, if not longer. And I would imagine in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, Planet Zoo will probably still remain unchallenged in zoo simulation. So even though I think 10 years of support is unlikely, it is a possibility that by 2029, Planet Zoo could still be getting new content and updates. I would absolutely love it if that were the case, but let's reduce our scope a little bit. If we are getting DLC and updates in 2024 and beyond, what can we expect? Excuse my phone going off. So, if Planet Zoo is to continue in 2024 and beyond, here's what I would like to see in the zoo's DLCs and updates. More consistency. More barriers and gates, more animal diversity, expanded exhibits, and more interesting animal behaviours. Where consistency is concerned, I would like to see more consistency across the animal signage, across requested building pieces, and more complete building sets. So with animal signage then, don't get me wrong, I like the signage that we get, particularly in the early DLC packs, and I'm not saying that they should be replaced by this, but ever since the Wetland Animal Pack, the animal signage has been absolutely top tier. You'll know what I mean from playing the game for yourselves, as well as the images that are about to be on screen. There's currently the 3 types of animal signage in the game. There's the Planet Zoo blank silhouette signs. There's the themed signs, which are currently on screen now, where they're the ones that are things like Southeast Asia and North Africa. And then, of course, we have the illustrated signs, which are the ones that are on screen now. And they're the ones that I think should be rolled out across all the animals. Animals from the base game and all the previous DLCs should have these illustrated signs made for them, and then the blank silhouette version should be added after that, whilst new DLCs should also continue with the themed animal signage, like the North America theme, the Southeast Asia theme, the North African pack, etc, etc, in addition to the illustrated animal signs for new species as well. Having a consistent theme in signage across the zoos we build might be a small detail, but it makes such a big difference in giving a zoo its own aesthetic and making everything seem like part of the same thing, even though the building materials and the planting may well be different. I just absolutely love these signs. Cannot get enough of them. So requested building pieces then. Triangular building pieces, a mesh building set, circular window facades for all build sets, not just the North African plaster build set, and more door options. These are just the first few that come to my mind when I think about what's missing from Planet Zoo that still hasn't been added even after all this time. Sure, we have slope pieces and blank triangle pieces, but triangular pieces for build sets could and would be quite useful. A mesh, gridded and non-gridded building set would expand upon the non-grid pieces that we already have in the game and allow us to build aviaries with less pieces and greater ease. Door options in the game are rather limited too. I would like some more generic doors that go with all the build themes, as well as some additional styled doors to reflect the DLC themes. Out of this list though, there is just one in particular that I would like the most, and it's the piece that's on screen now. It's the circular North African plaster window facade. It's such a good piece and I absolutely love it, and I would love it if it was added to all the build sets. The stone, the brick and the concrete sets would suit this piece exceptionally, as would the mud set and even the bamboo sets to an extent. The wooden sets would be a little bit more specific as they have, planks and horizontal and vertical lines. It could make it a bit difficult to get a nice looking texture. But definitely, I'd absolutely 100% love this piece to be rolled out across all the build sets, because there's nothing worse than having to mush together pieces to create a circular window frame, or you have these plaster circular windows that stand out against the material that the building's made from, even when you're recolouring the pieces. This, above all else, would be an absolute must for me, as this one piece is rolled out across all the build sets and would easily encourage me to continue playing the game for another year, simply due to the habitats and recreations that I could use this piece in. Diagonal pieces that are also on the grid would also be a major upgrade to the building system and allow us to make more interesting and accurate buildings. So completed building sets is actually an interesting one, and one that I may make a separate video about, to be honest, because there isn't a one size fits all answer. But some build sets are lacking pieces that other build sets have. This goes far beyond that plaster circular window thing mentioned just before. And I've picked the mud set as the example. You can see that on your screens now. This set has several pieces that are unique to this pack. I have highlighted those in yellow. So these pieces are not available in any other build set. They're only available in the mud set. This pack does have some pieces that only a couple of other build sets have, and I've highlighted those ones in blue. So yellow ones are unique to this set, and the blue ones are shared between this set and just a couple of others. When you think about it and you look at how many pieces are yellow and blue, there's a lot of pieces, and this is just the mud set. There are a few other pieces in other sets too that have the same story, like the circular plaster window piece in the North African plaster set. There are some pieces that do make sense to be kept to just one or a few build sets. For example, the South American temple rubble doesn't really fit any of the build themes, so it makes sense for that to remain exclusive to the South American theme. But there are other pieces, like the plaster circular window piece, that are just crying out to be included in other build sets. The ones from the mud sets that I think make the most sense to be rolled out across other sets, I've highlighted in light blue, and those are the gridded column pieces and the 1x4 meter panel. These should, in my opinion, be rolled out across the other build sets. But what I mean is, like I said earlier, it isn't as simple as a one-size-fits-all answer. Because obviously the mud pieces come with like rounded bases and stuff like that on some of them. And you don't really get that in any of the other sets, but then you don't need it in the other sets. So it's about striking a balance. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. It'd be a few pieces from here, a few pieces from there, and then roll them out across all the sets. That's what it would be, in my mind anyway. So, habitat barriers and habitat gates. Since launch, we have only had one new barrier and 2 new habitat gates added into the game. Although most of us do use null barriers, null gates require mods. Having more pre-made barriers and habitat gates in the game moving forward, I apologise about the ambulance, is definitely something I would look forward to, and something that I think is necessary. As this animal roster continues to expand, so should the fences available to keep them in. The same goes for guest gates too. We only have that one style of guest gate, and it's such a clunky wooden beast. If you've been to zoos and wildlife parks, you will know that the gates for walkthrough habitats rarely look like the gates to Jurassic Park, so more realistic and scaled options would be greatly appreciated. So more animals, essentially, is something I would like to see in a zoo game moving forward, ironically. It is a zoo game, after all. At the time of recording this, there are still several notable omissions from the game that are present and common in most zoos and wildlife parks. For me, I would like to see tamarins and marmosets, more birds, flying birds, exhibit fish and aquatic creatures, smaller animals, including in the walkthrough exhibits, and more geographic representation, as some areas have dominated the animal roster more than others. So despite being some of the smallest mammals on the planet, tamarins and marmosets leave the biggest space in the game. These miniature monkeys are a common feature in even the most basic of zoos, so the fact that they haven't been added to the game yet is criminal, quite frankly. And if or when they are added, they would have to be habitat animals, not walkthrough animals. There are many species to choose from, so I've selected some of the most well-known and most common species of tamarin and marmosets that are kept in captivity. Although they are little, they're not that much smaller than the black-tailed prairie dog, and those are habitat animals. Similarly, tamarins and marmosets are often displayed in a wide variety of habitat shapes that go beyond rectangles. I've seen circular habitats, square and circular habitats, and completely unique curved habitats. So limiting these curious creatures to a walkthrough exhibit would be a huge shame and a whole host of wasted potential. Even after 4 years, we still only have 7 birds in the game, and 2 of those 7 are penguins. Don't get me wrong, I am not complaining about penguins, and I would actually welcome some more penguins into the game. But when you only have 7 species of bird, and 2 of those are penguins, it does imbalance the bird choices. we need more birds in the game. That is the bottom line, especially if we aren't going to get flying birds. I've included some birds that could be added to the game that would function in a similar fashion to the red-crowned crane, the emu and the peafowl, as well as one option that sort of bends and blurs the lines a little bit. So high up on my list are the secretary birds and the shoebills. I would imagine they would appear quite high on other people's lists too. The secretary bird would probably behave more like the emu in the game, whilst the shoebill would be more like the red-crowned crane. Other birds that aren't high up on my list but are on the list somewhere are the elegant crested tinamou, the helmeted guinea fowl, the grey-crowned crane, the mute swan, the Canada goose, the capercaillie, and the greater rhea. Sticking with the mute swan and the Canada goose, these fall into the birds that would blend that line. Mute swans and Canada geese are waterfowl, meaning they spend a fair portion of their day on bodies of water. As it currently stands, there are no waterfowl in the game. The closest we have is the greater flamingo. I think the mute swan and the Canadian goose is a bit too boring for a first inclusion though, so I've decided to go with any pelican species. It would be the equivalent of the otter or the hippo, a bird that actually likes to be in the water. Just more birds and a variety of birds are needed in the game desperately. This next one is sure to ruffle a few feathers, pun intended. Flying birds. Some players think they're necessary to the game, some players don't, some players really want them in the game, others don't. I wouldn't say that flying birds are necessary, but I do certainly want them. And if the game is to continue into 2024 and beyond, flying birds will have to come sooner or later, because more and more people will just jump on the bird bandwagon. So in 2024, if not earlier, I would like to see flying birds. Of course, this comes with several problems and questions, such as how will the birds navigate? Will we be able to build habitats for them, or will they be in pre-built aviaries? What birds are going to be added? And a few other issues. I won't go into the intricacies in this video. I will do a separate video on how birds could work in Planet Zoo. But essentially, I do believe it is possible, and I do believe it would work similar to the current in-game traversable area mapping. In the game, currently, there are 3 traversable mapping mechanics. There's land, there's climbing, and there's swimming. Animals enter a habitat, and the game begins to calculate and map out what is traversable land, what parts of the habitat are climbable, and then what bodies of water there are. The water calculation also has 2 aspects to it, which is how much water there is, and how much of it is deep water. I can see flying birds working in a similar fashion to that. It would calculate how much area there is to fly and how much of that area is open. Of course, there would need to be some additional systems put in place, such as roofs, perhaps, that would prevent the birds from escaping. I'd imagine this would function similar to the escapable points that show up in the habitat heat map. It might not be easy for Frontier to implement this because of the potential clashes with other animals, but there are ways to do it and even ways around it. I don't think there'd be many people that are too bothered if we couldn't mix flying birds and non-flying birds, reptiles and mammals in the game. But that's how I see it functioning, essentially. However, another option would be those pre-built aviaries that function very much like the exhibits and the walkthrough exhibits that were already in the game, but they'd have to have different shapes and a bigger footprint. As for what birds could be added, I think there are some obvious candidates such as parrots, macaws, lorikeets, cockatiels and cockatoos. There are some other inclusions I would like to see, however. High up on my list are hornbills, the bigger the better, so great hornbills and Javan rhinoceros hornbills, parakeets, finches, the Java green magpie, thrushes such as the orange-headed thrush and the Sumatran laughing thrush, blue-billed teal, red foddy, sparrows and conure. I would expect a mix of large and small birds, things as big as vultures and as small as sort of thrushes, sparrows and budgies. If hummingbirds were to be added, I think they'd probably get added as a walkthrough exhibit, as they're just so small and fast, we'd probably lose them in anything bigger. Next on the list are exhibit fish and aquatic creatures. Let's be real for a second or so here. It's incredibly unlikely that fully aquatic mammals like whales and dolphins, reptiles and large fish like sharks and groupers will ever make it into Planet Zoo. And I'm fine with that because most zoos and wildlife parks don't have dolphins, whales and very large fish. Dolphins and whales have been phased out of collections, thankfully, including in aquariums. Though it is far too late and there are some institutions still holding on. Large fish are generally reserved for aquariums because they have the facilities to house them appropriately, whereas typically a zoo doesn't because it has so many other things to deal with. However, smaller fish and other aquatic creatures could certainly make their way into the game. We already have a semi-aquatic frog and a terrapin, and possibly a fully aquatic newt in the game, as well as a fully aquatic axolotl, so aquatic exhibit animals could definitely be on the cards, as could small fish. Crabs would be an obvious choice, as they can exist both in and out of the water. You've got plenty of choice for crabs, from tiny tropical vampire crabs to the mid-sized Pacific rock crabs and Dungeness crabs. Mud skippers would also be a good choice, as they can exist both in and out of the water. And as for fully aquatic creatures, animals like lobsters, shrimps, seahorses, octopus and eels, and of course fish, would make a good choice, something to make exhibits more interesting and usable. But we'll get onto exhibits a bit later in the video. Now, Planet Zoo isn't just lacking birds, it's lacking in size too. There are plenty of medium and large animals, but only a few small animals. It would be nice to have a range of small animals across a range of geographic representation in the game, so another armadillo species wouldn't go amiss. The quokka, hedgehogs, chipmunks, chevrotain, poodoo, agouti, dik-diks, more tortoises, more bats, marmots and small cats such as the Scottish wildcat, the oncilla, the margay and the Pallas's cat. Tamarins, marmosets and squirrels would also add to these smaller animals. And on the topic of geographic representation, we need more of it. And on screen now is a map created by Yoav_R on the Planet Zoo Reddit that shows all the habitat animals currently in the game at the time of recording, and more importantly, the regions that they come from. And you can see that there are some areas in particular that need more content from Frontier, and for me, those areas are South America, Europe, and sort of Asia, Oceania. Here are some of those suggestions. So for South America, howler monkeys, bush dogs, Andean bear, poodoo, rhea, tamarins, marmosets, margay, spider monkey, squirrel monkey. Europe, red squirrel, pine marten, wisent, hedgehog, wolverine, owl, vulture, wildcat, eagle. And Asia, Oceania, tree kangaroo, kiwi, quokka, Tasmanian devil, kakapo, Sulawesi macaque, Prevost squirrel, Visayan warty pig, Philippine spotted deer, hornbills and pheasants. I think if we do get DLC in 2024 and beyond, some of these animals will likely make it into the game via those DLCs, maybe even 2023, depending on what those other two DLCs are. Expand exhibits then is something I would definitely like to see. Bigger exhibits, smaller exhibits, different shaped exhibits, more exhibit customization option, more diverse and unique exhibit species, multi-species exhibits. I think you can only take a 4x4 meter cube so far. Sometimes this is too big for some of the exhibit animals, and sometimes it's too small. Just a general update or exhibit focused on DLC would be greatly appreciated, or even adding to exhibits over several updates and DLCs would be a good idea too. It's just something to make them more functional and usable, and you can see by the images on screen, the top left is a bat enclosure, much bigger than the walkthrough exhibit we have for bats at the moment, which I think is far too small. Then you've got an aquatic exhibit in the bottom left. You've got a frog exhibit in the bottom middle. You've got I think that's a frog exhibit and a turtle exhibit in the bottom right. You've got a frog exhibit in the top middle, and you've got a fish, starfish and crab exhibit in the top right. And they're all different shapes, different terrain and everything like that. I just think we need more functionality for the exhibits. So lastly, I say lastly, there's still a lot left, but this is the last of the things I would like to see. More interesting animal behaviours in Planet Zoo. So preening, expanded group vocalization, more enrichment usage between DLC and base game, individual behaviour traits, and brachiation for orangutans. Kicking things off with preening, I would like to see birds in the game preen themselves and others. I've never seen it in the birds that are currently in the game, so I'm going to assume it isn't a thing. There are some animations and interactions that I've seen that are very similar to preening, but I've never actually seen something that I can pinpoint as, yep, it's preening. So just a little bit of that extra realism would be nice to see in the game, especially if we are getting more birds on the way. Expanded group vocalizations is something quite simple, and it is already in the game. I'd just like to see it expanded to more species. Currently, Arctic wolves, timber wolves and siamangs can engage in chorus calls. I would like to see this rolled out across lions, especially male lions, lemurs, sea lions, chimps, bonobos, zebras and largibbons, if it hasn't already been rolled out to largibbons. I'm sure there are many more animals in the game that can call in chorus in a social setting, so they could be added too, but those are just the first ones I can think of off the top of my head. So enrichment then. Some animals can use a lot of enrichment, other animals only have a few options when it comes to enrichment. Enrichment just needs reworking so that more base game animals can use the DLC enrichment, and more DLC animals can use the base game and other DLC enrichment. The first one that comes to mind is the sun bear hammock. The fact that there's only the sun bear that can use that I'm aware of is just shocking, quite frankly. So enrichment just needs reworking a bit so that it can be rolled out across other species. Individual behaviour traits then is interesting, and this system does pretty much feature in Jurassic World Evolution 2. I would like to be able to see an individual animal's temperament from the trade centre or by clicking on the animal info panel. We already have like shy, confident and ambivalent animals in the game, so it would be great if there could be some variation on this, for example. So an ammo leopard that is confident and charismatic, or a capybara that's lazy and relaxed, a timid flamingo, or an unsociable tortoise. These variations often appear in animals in the wild, even more so in captivity, especially in those raised around or by humans. I don't think this will make it in the game, to be honest, but if it does, it would allow for us to have, say, only confident and charismatic animals, even if that species is generally quite shy. In Jurassic World Evolution and Evolution 2, this is achieved by players editing the genes of the dinosaur, where in Planet Zoo it would just be randomly selected in the trade centre. Simple enough. And how could I want more for Planet Zoo without mentioning that orangutans still cannot brachiate? Despite brachiation being added into the game, I can't say anything else beyond that. Really, we just need brachiation for the orangutan. Getting it for the chimp, the gorilla and the bonobo would be nice too, but those three species don't brachiate nearly as often, whereas the orangutan's primary mode of locomotion in the trees is to brachiate. So if anybody from Frontier is watching, please give us brachiation for orangutans, please. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this probably quite long video. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Just remember to keep them realistic. We're not going to get whales, unicorns or dinosaurs in the game. It's just not happening. If Planet Zoo content is your thing, then subscribe to the channel. I do exclusively Planet Zoo content with weekly videos, usually, anyway. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at JW_YT. Until the next time, my friends, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, stay kind, and I shall see you in that next video. Bye bye for now.